call. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. I'm Kathy Hall. I'm the Executive Director of the Nebraska Statewide Independent Living Council. First, I would like to acknowledge all of the groups that have been involved in planning this event. And that includes the League of Human Dignity, Independence Rising, Easter Seal to Nebraska, Madonna School and Community-Based Services, APSI, Nebraska VR, Adapt Nebraska, Integrative Transitions, Nebraska Family Support Network, the Nebraska Statewide Independent Living Council, Disability Rights Nebraska, the University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities at Monroe-Meyer Institute, the Nebraska Council on Developmental Disabilities, People First of Nebraska, the Arc of Nebraska, Harper Self-Directed Services, and the Brain Injury Alliance of Nebraska. Now I just have a few housekeeping rules I need to go over. We have a list of keystrokes for Zoom available in the Dropbox. And I believe Melanie's here, so if you could put that link into the chat, I would appreciate it.
It's there.
Okay. We are asking you, because we are using sign language interpreters, we are asking people to keep their videos off unless they're using the interpreter, because then they need to have them on. All these sessions will be closed caption. To turn that on, you just need to click on the little arrow beside the CC button, and the toolbar will, the CC button on the toolbar, and then you enable subtitles, and then the captioning will appear. If you have any questions for the presenters, please list them in the chat feature. I've got a number of people monitoring the chat feature for questions today. Just a reminder, on Wednesday, there will be a panel presentation from the Hearts of Glass. And I'll have Melanie put the link for that into the chat also. And the final thing is that all sessions will be recorded. If you don't want to be identified, you can rename yourself. This can be done by hovering over your little square until the three dots appear in the corner. Click on the dot and select rename from the drop-down menu and enter a new name like anonymous. And at this point, I am going to turn it over to Brad Meurrens, who will be your moderator today. Brad?
Thank you, Kathy. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Kathy. My name is Brad Meurrens, and I am the Public Policy Director at Disability Rights Nebraska. Disability Rights Nebraska is the designated protection and advocacy organization for persons with disabilities in Nebraska. And I will be your MC for this afternoon. So to further support the goals of Disability Employment Awareness Month, we wanted to focus our discussion today on some organizations that can help people with disabilities land that job and support them while making the transition to employment. We have a full slate today with some great success stories. So let me introduce our presenters and get myself out of the way. We have Julie Shively, the Self-Employment Program Specialist with Nebraska Vocational Rehabilitation. Sierra Baum, she's an entrepreneur and owner of Lone Wolf Farrier Services. Irene Britt, Executive Director, Independence Rising. And Shauna Dahlgren, Work Incentive and Community Outreach Specialist, Easter Seals, Nebraska. So at this point, I will turn it over to Julie Shively for her presentation. When I call up your slides, Julie, let me know and I will advance them for you.
Okay, thanks, Brad.
Take it away, Julie.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. As Brad said, I'm Julie Shively. I'm the program specialist for Nebraska VR Self-Employment Program. And I really want to thank you for the opportunity to present at today's Disability Employment Awareness event. So I'm going to start with Nebraska VR's mission. We help people with disabilities prepare for, obtain, and maintain employment while helping businesses recruit, train, and retain employees with disabilities. This includes self-employment. So next slide, please. Oh, there you go. Self-employment defined. To generate excess cash flow from profitable operations by providing a specific good or a product or a billable service through at least 51% ownership of the business, and to earn income directly from one's own trade or profession, and to attain financial independence by maximizing earning capacity based on individual disability. So in other words, the intent is for this business to produce income at a level required for a client to be self-sufficient or move towards greater self-sufficiency to the maximum their disability allows. All right, so we're on the correct slide, Brad, thanks. So next is the self-employment discussion. So once an individual is eligible for Nebraska VR, there is a self-employment orientation and an in-depth exploration. And so in this exploration that identifies, the VR specialists talk about the advantages and disadvantages of self-employment. They talk about traits that are indicators of success, for self-employment, like, for example, some green flags might be persistence. It might be a stable financial history. It might be, demonstrated personal initiative over and over again. Red flags might include just some questions around financial stability. There might be some questions, can physical health, mental health tolerate kind of the stresses that go along with being self-employed? And to dig down a bit more about some discussion points, is the client able to access capital to start, grow, and sustain their business? Does the idea accommodate any limitations presented by the consumer's disability? How will the business affect the client's benefits? And is an appropriate and legal venture? You know, the other thing is what's going on in the industry. Is it growing? Is it dying? You know, one helpful resource is actually Department of Labor, dol.nebraska.gov. That gives a lot of really good labor market information. You know, are there enough customers willing to purchase the product or service for a profit to be made? And, you know, is the consumer prepared to accept the strain that comes with running a business? Next slide, please. So here are some examples of some businesses that our clients have done and are currently operating. And let me tell you, when all of the pieces come into play and all come together, it is a beautiful thing to see. Next slide, please. So here are some businesses that Nebraska VR would be unable to support at this time. You can read through those, and if you have any questions, let me know. So next slide, please. So the initial steps for self-employment. If after that in-depth discussion, the client is still up to pursue this, the client completes a self-employment questionnaire. Once that's completed, the client and the VR employment specialist sit down and they discuss the questionnaire in depth. And they also go over the personal finance sheets, which is another word for a budget. They obtain the credit score and the credit report. And if a client would be choosing supported self-employment, VR can authorize a milestone payment to our developmental disability partners, who's ever assisting, to assist that client with that paperwork. VR also does an evaluation to assess bookkeeping and business skills. And if the client is a Social Security recipient, releases are completed and the client is referred for a general benefits orientation. And that is super important, and I'm sure Shauna will be talking about that later. So a client understands the full impact of self-employment income and their hours on their benefits. That's kind of a unique thing to self-employment, is Social Security not only looks at income, but they also look at the hours too that are being put in. Next slide, please, Brad. Okay, so after that paperwork that I mentioned is completed, that is sent to me. I review all of those things again, which is a self-employment questionnaire, the budget sheets, the credit score, the credit report, the vocational evaluation report, and should a client be requesting assistance with a business expansion, for example, Nebraska VR would also need the most recent 3 years of the business tax returns as part of that packet of information. So once we have all of that, the next step is I would meet with our self-employment team, including our VR specialist and any provider partners we're working with, and we would all review the materials to determine if a feasibility assessment would be the next step in the process. Next slide, please. Okay, so with the feasibility assessment, Nebraska VR has an independent consultant that we've hired to do this report. And so what the consultant looks at is the business idea or concept feasible based on an appraisal of similar ventures and their result? And is there sufficient demand for the product or service in the general market outside of friends or family? And does the client possess the technical, interpersonal, and managerial skills to run the business? The report, usually finished, is about 15 to 25 pages in length on average. The business consultant then sends the completed report to both myself and the VR employment specialist the client is working with. Next slide, please. So the feasibility, the results. We receive the report. I coordinate a meeting with our client, with the business consultant that wrote the report, the VR staff, and any of our provider partners. And so the report is going to give a recommendation of either to move forward with business planning, or it's going to give a recommendation not to move forward with business planning. And no matter what the result, included in that report are the reasons why they recommend moving forward or why they don't recommend moving forward. Alternatives, if it's not feasible, which, honestly, that's disappointing to hear. Let's be straight. That's only really happened a couple of times. But alternatives are discussed with the client and, along with their specialist, and the client may be referred back to work with the employment specialist. Next slide, please. So with moving forward with business plan development, the client and Nebraska VR, we work with community partners such as the Nebraska Business Development Center statewide, REAP, which is the Rural Enterprise Assistance Program, SCORE, and I should have also included the SBA. They're a great partner in writing their business plan. 3 years of financial projections are also developed and startup needs are determined. I wrote here that estimates are obtained and, and a discussion of the client contributions to business are also detailed on a spreadsheet we have. For example, that might be existing equipment or inventory that they have. When the business plan is being developed, the VR specialist refers to assistive technology if accommodations will be needed. After the business plan is completed, including a specified target net monthly income for the business, there is a meeting held with the client, the VR staff, and our provider partners. We look over the business plan, the target net monthly income goal, the financial projections, everything. And if VR and the client agree, the VR employment specialist develops the IPE, which is the plan, which details what the startup needs are going to be, what the assistive technology needs will be, and those are all listed on the IPE, and VR responsibilities are also specified on the IPE. The client responsibilities, in addition, are outlined on the plan, including the submission of receipts and providing the monthly financial statement of the business income to me, which I share with the VR specialist, the guardian, any provider partners that we're teaming up with. Next slide, please. The employment specialist then authorizes appropriate startup costs, skill training or disability related costs as described in the business plan and the assistive technology report if appropriate, as well as benefits planning if that's needed. Next slide. And I, as the self-employment program specialist, continue to work with the client, and if they need referrals for other resources, I help them locate those things. During the implementation phase, that's when the client is acquiring their startup needs and launching their business. I do weekly check-in with them to address any problems and ensure that the new business is progressing as planned. I help them problem solve any barriers that they encounter, and I help them check in to see how their training and supports are being implemented. And then I continue to provide ongoing monthly business monitoring in the form of phone calls or Zoom meetings to ensure that progress is going as planned. And I also share that information with the VR specialist and any of our partner providers. Next slide, please. Again, touched on this a bit, but the client responsibilities again are outlined on the IPE about the submission of all receipts from startup needs, and to provide the monthly business income and financial statement to VR, to myself, as long as their case is open with Nebraska VR. Next slide, please. For a successful closure of the case, we look at when the target net monthly income goal from a business plan has been reached, a successful outcome may be considered. If a client is unable to reach their target net monthly income goal, but stabilizes at a lower income level for a minimum of 3 months, a successful outcome may be considered if the client is in agreement. So as you can see, there's a lot of moving parts to self-employment. Thank you very much for inviting me today to speak. Are there any questions?
Yes, Christy asks, how many people with disabilities are self-employed through VR in Nebraska?
I don't know that I have a number for you. I didn't quite. I really, sorry, there's my alarm. I don't have the exact number on that.
What about a guesstimate? You don't have to have an exact. Are there many? How's that?
Well, a fair amount, I would say. Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
That was the only question in the chat.
Okay. Well, then I will now pass this along to my co-panel members, Brad and Sierra.
Melanie has put in the Dropbox link so people can look and see what your PowerPoint is about and get more information.
Okay, and my contact information, sorry, Brad, I kind of went past that. The following slide had my email contact information if anybody wants to reach out. Thank you very much.
Julie, would you put that in the chat box, please? Thank you. Brad has now added it to the chat box.
Wonderful. Thank you, Julie. We appreciate that information. And now we wanted to hear from Sierra Baum.
Hello, can you see and hear me?
Yes, Sierra. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your journey to where you are now? And then I know we have some questions. So go ahead and give us a little background about what you're doing and what your journey was. And then I've got questions for you after that.
Okay. My name's Sierra Baum, and I started my journey with the VR. It was 2016, and I am what is called a farrier, which for non-horse people, that means a horseshoer or a person that takes care of horses' feet. So it's a very agricultural job. I'm outside for the whole day, and that is what I do full time. And I am self-employed. I'm my own boss.
Well, let me tell you, first off, what you do scares me. There's no way I could get anywhere near that big of an animal with that sharp of hooves. No way. So what you do scares me. So I appreciate that you do what you do. So, and I apologize for mispronouncing your last name, Sierra.
Oh, no problem. It's a common mistake.
I can imagine. Well, I had a friend of mine in high school with the same last name, and he pronounced it bomb. So I apologize. So, what training and additional supports did you acquire as part of the self-employment services process?
Well, I trimmed horses' feet since I was a young teenager. And as I got older, I did that part-time, very part-time, just to get a little extra money. And so I kind of had a base knowledge of operating the self-employed side, and also understanding of a horse's foot, prior to going deeper into it. But there was a lot that I needed to learn, and that the VR was able to provide me in how to actually run a sustainable business that could support me financially, both in the business itself and for my personal expenses as well, living expenses.
And I noticed that part of the process that Julie talked about earlier, there was like a feasibility study and the development of a business plan, and really taking that sort of like quantitative look and analysis, like before really starting to ramp up and get into the business, actually implementing the business part of it. How important was that feasibility study and that business plan development? How important was that to your business?
It was very important. It was, uh, it kind of put things to where it was more tangible for me. It put everything in perspective of the costs to run my business. It allowed me to see where I needed to either cap certain expenses or figure out a way to make more income to take care of the expenses needed for my business, which was very crucial in any business, to be able to get a full understanding of what it takes for cost. Because with any business, you do have to spend some money to make money, but you can't have yourself go on a downhill slide. You have to make sure that you are making some sort of profit.
It sounds like they helped you institute and put into place some controls to kind of help make sure that you didn't just kind of like, oh, we made our first dollar, now it's all spent.
Yes, exactly.
Right? That you could kind of budget and plan for a long term, as opposed to, we're only going to be in here for 2 months to make money, and we're going to get out because now we're gone. Now we've, haven't really had those controls, and I think it sounds to me, and I'm not a business person, but it would sound to me, that would be really important for people like me who need to have that, discipline about financial, fiscal discipline. Don't you think that was important?
Oh, big time. Yes, it was hugely important. Because I think that is a huge part of what is a downfall to many people that pursue the self-employed, is you have to have certain caps on things and an understanding and something to look at, which the VR provided with their feasibility plan. And it helps you not go through that road of, like you said, make the money in the 2 months and get out. This is a long-term thing. And yeah, you have to plan a lot, when you're self-employed.
And it sounds to me that often, and I think for a lot of folks, that discipline, that fiscal discipline, might not be organic. It might not be just self-evident that you need everyone's going to need some help, especially around that fiscal discipline. At least for me anyway. I mean,
Oh,
budgets
yeah.
are hard.
And I
So
do agree.
No, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I do agree with you. I think some people need more help in that area than others. And I do think that that is kind of a factor in choosing the self-employed route as well.
And then one last question I had for you. What were some of the challenges you faced in your first year? And then can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges you're facing due to this pandemic that we're experiencing?
Well, my first year, I would say my biggest challenge was actually making time for myself. When I left horseshoeing school, I hit the ground running, which is a great attitude to have when you're self-employed, but you also need to allow yourself a little bit of downtime, have a day or two every week to be able to just give your mind a break. I believe there was one period of time that first year I went 2 months straight working every single day. And, it just is a lot for your body and mind to take. And I quickly realized that I needed to work in time for downtime so that my mind and body could recharge and be able to do the job that is required of me. Which definitely was not what I anticipated going in. That would be the biggest struggle. But it is very important for anybody that's self-employed to do that, just because if you don't, then burnout is a strong possibility. And that's a very quick way of, killing the business, because if you get burned out, then you just can't continue on. As far as the COVID pandemic, thankfully for my business, I am in open areas. I'm usually outside. If I'm indoors, it's usually in a well-ventilated barn. I have taken some precautions to, if I am in a small enclosed area, I make sure to properly wear a mask, and I make sure that I keep anything that's frequently touched disinfected, and kind of take protocol that way to keep both myself and my clients safe.
Well, that's good to hear. And it sounds like the program has really kind of helped you think of some things that some questions that you might not normally think of. Just when you say, "Oh, I want to open a business," it's not that easy, is it?
No, definitely not.
Thank you very much for your story and sharing your expertise and your history. Are there any questions in the chat box, Mary?
Yes, there are. Kathy would like to know what kind of expenses does this kind of employment have, a business have?
Well, the first expense would be the education. Going into horseshoeing school, which there's a variety of schools throughout the nation. And that would probably be your biggest expense starting off. Then you have your tools, which you can have very bare basic and work your way up. But I would say your general start of tools would roughly run you $5,000 to $10,000. Just starting off with that. You got fuel to travel, wear and tear on vehicles. This is a very highly physical job, so you have to take in account of the medical, making sure that you have good medical insurance, making sure you have money put away if you get injured and need to go see a doctor, because it is definitely a job that you could get hurt or injured easily from, so you do have to take that into consideration as well. Then Yeah, that's basically the startup costs of it, and then continued education clinics, which have been very, very useful for me. And those, are, range from, you could go to a small clinic that's just 100 to a big clinic that's 500 or more. And there's several throughout the year. Except for this year because of the pandemic, it's been a little cut short. But if a person were to pursue something like this, or even a trade, that there is the option of continued education, I would 100% recommend that, despite the expenses, because in the long run, it does pay off to do that continued education.
Great. Are there any, thank you, Sierra. Are there any other questions, Mary?
Well, first off, did you use any kind of assistive technology? We had a question yesterday about rural areas.
As far as assistive technology, I did not need to use any real specialized equipment. There was a suggestion, because I do have a hard time hearing or understanding questions or information given to me right off. And the VR had suggested using a recorder at the school to be able to review back through the information given to me, which was very helpful.
Up there. And I'll move that if you want me to at some point. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. That seems to be the only other question. And people are very excited about what you have said and think your occupation is fascinating.
It is a very nice occupation for sure.
I find it scary and frightening, but
it can be scary at times too.
But I'm a city boy, so what do I know? Anyway, thank you very much, Sierra. That was enlightening and very informative, and we wish you the best of luck with your business in the future.
Thank you.
The next speaker we have today is Irene Britt from Independence Rising. Irene?
Hi, everybody. I'm Irene Britt. I'm the Executive Director of Independence Rising. We're one of the 2 independent living centers in Nebraska. The League of Human Dignity is the other independent living center. And I know we don't have a whole lot of time, Brad, so I'm going to ask you to bring up our PowerPoint, and I will start going through that a little bit. And in our PowerPoint, I just have some information on our independent living center, our core services, as well as our fee-for-service programs. I will just briefly go over that. I want to thank Lindsay Durham. She's been our employee that's been on most of this planning for the employment presentation. So thank you, Lindsay, for putting a lot of this together. We couldn't have done it without her. And then we also have videos of some staff that we employ that have disabilities. So they kind of in their own words, what it's like to be a person with a disability in the workplace. So we have 5 office locations, as you can see, throughout our 50 counties in Nebraska. And that outline is all the counties on the left-hand side. So it would be starting with, let's see, on the other side of the Cherry County. So Sheridan, starting around Sheridan, Grant, Hooker, Thomas, on that side. So those are our counties we serve. We have the federal funding that supports the 5 core services that all independent living centers provide if they're federally funded. And Brad, you can go to the next slide and that will show our grant funded services. So those top services, living skills training, advocacy, information referral, peer mentoring and networking, transition services, and we have some special COVID funding and services for independent living right now. So we are able to do some special funding for consumers of the agency in our independent living program that require additional service because of COVID. And that can be PPE. We've purchased phone cards for people that need those and don't have them due to COVID needs, and just a variety of things. We have a goal. If they have a goal within our agency and they're a consumer of the agency in the IL program, we can utilize that funding. So that's been additional to what the other services we provide. As an independent living center, we have to have at least 51% of our staff in the independent living program be people with disabilities that experience disabilities. And I'd say we're probably closer to 90%. Pretty much everybody that works in our independent living program self-discloses to having a disability. So under the independent living grant funded services, we have our fee-for-service programs. And I won't go into all of those for the sake of time, but if anybody has any questions on any of those, you certainly can ask after this presentation. I don't think my email address was on there, but I could put it in the chat also if you had questions aside from that. And so Brad, I'm hoping the next section is our videos. So the introduce yourself, there we go. Okay, here's the words from our staff, which is the most important part of our presentation.
I'm Deb Turner. I'm the FAME Program Manager and Family Peer Support Specialist at Independence Rising.
My name is Connie Perrin and I work for Independence Rising.
My name is Xavier McBride and I work for Independence Rising.
My name is Sue Britt and I work for Independence Rising.
Like an environment where I can work relatively without stress, and a place that I can just be happy.
Accessibility, ability to get into the building easily and room to turn around in the offices. But the number one thing that I look for in accessibility are the restrooms. I need to be able to get my wheelchair in there and be able to access everything without bumping into walls.
My disability when I am on the job.
Making phone calls to people is my daily challenge.
When you're hired with Independence Rising, they know up front that you have a disability. And with that, I don't feel like you're being judged if you're not feeling well or you have to take time off. So you don't have that guilt factor for missing work. I also am very fortunate that I have people at work that I can talk to that are very empathetic of my situation. And I always end up leaving work feeling better about myself and my situation.
Because I'm definitely a perfectionist, I make sure that everything, when I do something here, I make sure that it is done well and perfectly.
Well, I understand my consumers' disabilities because of mine.
I feel like because of my disability, I can relate to the consumers.
I like to think that I'm able to empower them just by seeing that I'm able to work despite my disability. And if I'm able to share my story with them, I hope that they realize that you are not your disability. And if you really want to do something, there's nothing that can stop you.
Independence Rising has given me the opportunity to work by letting me have a work partner so I don't have to face the public alone.
I think that my employer would understand my disability.
I have had challenges when my oldest son was in high school, trying to be able to be there for him when he would have his breakdowns and when he would not be in school. I found myself having to work from home, which was not bad for me. I mean, I was able to be there when he needed to go to his counseling appointments. And if he just needed a break from school because things were too tough and he just couldn't handle the day at school, it allowed me to be home with him and to be able to help him that way. You know, so I wish that some jobs in employees, they would understand that children that have a mental health disorder, it's really challenging for the parents to be able to know that they need to be home for their child, and yet their employee expects them to be at work, 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, or whatever it may be. So it's just very challenging to be able to stay home with your kid when you need to. I was blessed enough that I was able to stay home and work from home. A lot of people don't have that option.
Hi, my name is Dwayne Krolikowski. I'm an independent living specialist with Independence Rising in Grand Island. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about my experiences as a disabled man, both looking for and keeping a job. I was born with cerebral palsy, so I have both physical and intellectual challenges that make it difficult for me in the workplace. But in 2009, my physical issues increased dramatically. And because of that, I was forced to quit the job that I was working at the time. And I spent the next several years, almost a decade, in fact, looking for the right job that would accommodate my needs. Because I'm both physically and intellectually disabled, I have a unique set of challenges. I cannot walk or stand for long periods of time. I have chronic pain that makes it difficult for me to work consistently. Intellectually, I have difficulty reading and writing, so I just had a lot of unique challenges that made finding a job that would fit all of those very, very difficult. And so I was at the point, after almost 10 years of being unemployed, where I was not sure if I would ever work a steady job again. I was really starting to consider life not being able to work. But then I had a friend who works for Independence Rising as well, tell me a little bit about the agency and what our mission is. And because they're dedicated to helping individuals with disabilities, I thought it would be a unique opportunity that might fit my needs. And I was right. Pursuing the job I have now with Independence Rising has been the best decision I have ever made. They have been so incredibly accommodating with my issues. They allow me to set my own schedule. The schedule is very flexible. I can reschedule things if I'm not feeling well on a certain day. I can work less or more certain times a week based on how I kind of can predict how I'm going to feel. Most importantly, when I'm not feeling well, they allow me to work from home, which has been very, very important and I think essential. I'm not sure I would be able to work if they would not allow me that accommodation. But everyone at Independence Rising has been incredible. and like I said, is the best decision I've ever made. I'd like to end by saying, if you're a member of the disabled community out there and you're looking for a job and it doesn't seem like there's much available to you, stay positive, stay optimistic. You never know when the perfect job is going to fall right in your lap. For me, it was a random conversation with a friend at a basketball game that led me to the best job I've ever had. So if you're frustrated out there looking for a job, it seems like there's not many opportunities for you out there. Stay optimistic, stay positive. The right job is out there for you. And if you keep looking, you'll find it, or it will find you. Thanks.
Okay, that's it for us. If anybody has any questions, we're happy to answer any questions. Or the one thing I didn't add before the video was Deb Turner, that works for us, is a parent of a child with a disability. She also identifies as a person with a disability. However, we thought that perspective was unique also, as we have a family organization program, and I myself am the parent of a child with a disability. So that it also has special challenges with being able to work consistently in the workplaces if you have a disabled person in your family that also requires your attention. So, yep, any questions, we're happy to take those.
There are none in the chat box. I think you did such a wonderful job. You answered everyone's questions.
Well, that was all on Lindsay's part, so thank you, Mary.
Actually, Christine just put in, what level of education do you need to have to work at Independence Rising?
You don't, for the independent living programs, for some of the fee-for-service program contracts, we have to abide by what those contracts say, and was the bottom half of that PowerPoint. But for the independent living program services, you don't have to have any certain level of education. It's built on life experience. So that's why we hire people with disabilities whenever possible, because as the video said, people with a disability that are in the workplace are going to understand other people, that also have disabling conditions more so than if a person doesn't have a disabling condition. So you really, if you are a person with a disability and life experience, that's going to be, one of the #1 factors in working in our independent living program.
Thank you. You've got some really great responses in here saying what a good video that was, etc. Jared wants to know what other program like this covers Eastern Nebraska. I believe the answer to that would be League of Human Dignity. Is that true?
That's correct. Yep, on that slide with the map on it, anything on the right-hand side of that slide, starting Cherry County over, that's the League of Human Dignity. That's correct.
And Travis wants to know what kind of jobs come with Independence Rising.
Oh gosh, there's lots of jobs now. I won't have time to go into everything, but the independent living specialist was what was covered. All of those people on the screen besides Deb Turner are independent living specialists, and they work in those 5 core services with individuals with disabilities. We're doing a lot of virtual meetings still, especially as COVID's on the uprise. We want to keep all of our staff safe as well as consumers we work with, but that is working with consumers on consumer-driven goals. So maybe a person is trying to find housing, maybe there's accessibility issues where they work, just a number of things. It's consumer-driven, and the goals are also consumer-driven. So someone with a disability can come to us and say, hey, these are my goals for community-based living. I need help working on these. And, most of the time, that's a person that we can work with an independent living specialist. So it's lots of peer-to-peer connections. But that's, in a nutshell, the service that independent living specialists provide. We also have fee-for-service programs that everything falls into the realm of disability in some capacity, but we employ chore providers, and that's for a contract we have where we go into people's homes that are persons with disabilities on the waiver, mostly the Medicaid waiver program, and provide in-home chore services. So we provide, we hire people as chore providers. We hire people as family support workers, and they monitor visitation between children and families that are trying to reunify through the Child and Family Service System. We have the Family Org program, where we hire peers that are parents of children with mental and behavioral health disabilities, and they provide peer-to-peer connections and mentoring with other parents that are looking for services, because they are also parents that are struggling with children with mental or behavioral health conditions. That's just a few programs we have. We are expanding into our peer programs. So we are working across the board more so, where we will be hiring individuals, and they have to go through a certification process, but individuals with mental behavioral health disabilities across adults across the lifespan, where we can work with other individuals with that have that same mental health diagnosis or behavioral health diagnosis. That's a fee-for-service program. So, it comes with a contract and more specifications than our independent living program. So we have peer kind of throughout fee-for-service and grant-funded programs. We have Peer Link in the Panhandle right now, where in 2 of those counties in the Panhandle, we already provide that service ongoing. So that's up and coming. And we have COVID funding within that peer program for people with mental health issues also.
I didn't realize that much, but I've also been asked another question repeatedly across the years, so I'm going to ask you, do you have to be on Medicaid to get independent living services?
No, you just have to be a person that self-discloses that you have this disabling condition, and you are requesting independent living services. That's for the independent living, the 5 core services. So you don't have to have any Medicaid, eligibility. You don't have to have a disability determination through Social Security. That's all, self-disclosure on your own part. And that's for those independent living services. For those fee-for-service programs, the qualifications for those programs just vary. Some of those do require Medicaid eligibility or behavioral health services through the regions. But the independent living services, which we're primarily talking about those today, those do not require any Social Security determination, Medicaid, Medicare, none of those things. It's just a person that has a disabling condition that has goals for living in community-based living. We don't work with people in nursing homes per se, unless they're planning on transitioning from a nursing facility into independent living. And then we also do work with transition age students quite often in the school system that, they don't have to have an IEP, but most of the time they do. And then we can work with them transitioning into adulthood.
Excellent. Thank you, Irene. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Brad.
It's great information. You do a great service.
Thank you.
The last presenter we have for you today is Shauna Dahlgren from the Easter Seals of Nebraska. Shauna? And I'll call your video up here if there's anything you want to say about you or your organization while I do that.
First, I think we'll do the slides about the Ticket to Work program, and we'll do the video last. So hi, as Brad said, my name is Shauna Dahlgren. I'm with Easter Seals, Nebraska. I'm a work incentive and community outreach specialist here. I've been doing this kind of work for a little over 20 years now. So worked with a lot of people over the years. And I just have to say, it's kind of hard to follow the great presenters and information that has been given already today, but I actually couldn't have asked for a better introduction or roll into what we're going to talk about with the Ticket to Work program. In fact, all of the speakers and the video just sort of encapsulate what we're going to talk about with the Ticket to Work program and the different considerations for each individual and the different types of employment that people consider and the considerations for each of those types of employment. But as kind of the last person in that last video said from Independence Rising, it really is kind of a starting place and keeping your mind open a little bit to the possibility that work is actually possible. And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit with the Ticket to Work program. So you can go to the next slide, Brad. With the Ticket to Work program, and first I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview of the Ticket to Work program overall. So if you haven't heard about the Ticket to Work program, this is a specific program that Social Security has established for SSDI and or SSI beneficiaries to sort of incentivize or encourage people to try to work, whether you've worked before or not. This is sort of the idea that people may be able to work if they have access to the supports and services that they need in order to find and maintain or advance in employment. And so the basic eligibility for the Ticket to Work program is being between the ages of 18 and 64. And you may have questions about the age range, but initially when the Ticket to Work program was sort of created and identified, it was for individuals receiving SSDI or SSI as an adult. And so people are considered an adult at age 18 and eligible for adult benefits based on their own disability. And the reason for 64 at this point is because originally full retirement age was 65. But people can actually participate if they're participating prior to age 65. They can participate until their full retirement age, which is now working its way up to 67. But ultimately, it's anybody who's between the ages of 18 and 64 receiving Social Security disability or SSI as an adult and want to work. They're either working or they have a work goal. Participation in the Ticket to Work program is voluntary. So even if you are already working, or if you want to work, you don't have to formally participate in the Ticket to Work program. There are work incentives available to you even if you don't. But again, the idea is that participating in the Ticket to Work program may give you access to supports and services that you may not otherwise have. And then as far as that voluntary participation, it is the beneficiary's choice which employment network or who they want to work with for the Ticket to Work program. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So if you go to the next slide, Brad. The next slide talks a little bit about the services that are potentially available through the Ticket to Work program. And actually they're available through the approved employment networks that you can participate with in the Ticket to Work program. So this is kind of a generalized list, and every employment network can sort of choose how they provide those services or how they provide access to those services. And some of the some of the services that are on this list are not available through every employment network, but they include things like career planning, follow along support, goal setting, resume preparation, maybe some job search assistance, if you need access to any sort of community resources, those kinds of things. And then we'll talk a little bit more about benefits education, healthcare advisement, and something called work incentives or benefits counseling. Okay, go to the next slide, Brad. So when you are thinking about whether or not you want to participate in the Ticket to Work program, as you heard through some of the speakers and the videos, there are a lot of things that people need to think about or kind of think about when they're thinking about employment. They may be related to mental health or physical health conditions or what types of jobs you might be able to do. They might be related to your benefits or financial situation. It might be trying to determine if you would like to pursue self-employment or if you want to go get a job through an employer. But in addition to those kind of considerations, you need to choose who you want to work with as an employment network. And so there are some ways that we would suggest you consider your options for who you might want to work with. I did include on this slide the Ticket to Work website, Social Security's Ticket to Work website, where you can go and you can see all of the different employment networks that cover your area. And you can actually contact and compare the services that are available through those employment networks. In the Dropbox, there should be a copy of a comparison worksheet that's available through the Ticket to Work program, where you can actually write down the names of employment networks, their contact information, and it has some suggestions for different types of questions that you might want to ask about what services they provide or how they provide services and some of those kinds of things, so that you might be able to better identify who might be an appropriate choice for you to work with as an employment network. There are local and national employment networks. And what that means is that there are some employment networks that only provide services within certain areas. So there might be employment networks that only serve certain counties in a particular state, or maybe they just serve a particular state, or there might be national employment networks that can really choose to work with anyone wherever they are in the United States. But they might not have, those national employment networks may not have local offices or local connections. So that's one thing that I always suggest people think about or ask about when they're looking at employment networks, is if you are someone who lives in Nebraska, let's say, and there's a national employment network where their offices are, say, in Washington, D.C., and that's the only offices that they have, they may not have somebody to work with you locally or an office that you can go to locally. I'm not saying they don't provide good services. I'm just saying that is something that you might want to consider when you're trying to evaluate who you might want to work with as an employment network. And again, each of those employment networks or each of those providers provide different services. So not all service providers are the same. There may be something you really like about one employment network that another employment network doesn't offer. And I think the Ticket to Work program is primarily an employment services program. So one of the key services you'll find is not always offered through an employment network is the benefits and work incentives counseling, which we here in Nebraska and a lot of other states actually feel is very important, because a lot of times that is one of the key considerations for individuals, or some of their biggest concerns are about the benefits that they receive and the implications of work. And so I'll just talk a little bit about how it is in Nebraska with the different types of employment networks. And I will tell you, I did not list out all of the local employment networks, but I'll talk about that in just a minute. I think it's important for people to know that the state VR agencies, so Nebraska VR, and I should have actually included probably NCBVI on here as well, as Nebraska Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired, as they are the state VR agency for individuals who are blind or visually impaired. And as a state VR agency, those agencies are essentially automatically employment networks with the Ticket to Work program. So I think it's important for individuals to know when they have an active case with one of those agencies, or they have a signed plan for employment, a signed IPE, they are essentially agreeing to participate in the Ticket to Work program. So that is just something to be aware of. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, but definitely something to be aware of. And then there are other employment networks, such as Easter Seals Nebraska. Some of the other ones, there aren't as many local options in Nebraska. Goodwill of Greater Nebraska, Community Options, some places like that are also employment networks that have local sort of areas in Nebraska. Easter Seals Nebraska does actually cover the entire state, and we are actually a national employment network, so we can really work with anyone, but we do provide services here locally. And as I said, those of us who do work in Nebraska, whether it's Goodwill of Greater Nebraska or some of our other community partners and other local employment networks, feel that the work incentives and benefits counseling is one of the most important services to provide, and do have certified benefits planners that can assist with those services. And so as Julie said, with Nebraska VR, you can choose self-employment as an option. They do support self-employment cases or individuals who are working for a wage. And that is the same really with any employment network or the Ticket to Work program in general. They can provide supports and services regardless of whether you're looking for wage employment or if you are pursuing self-employment. So, but each employment network may be a little bit different in the types of services that they actually offer or how they work with individuals. So those can be important questions to ask. Okay, go ahead and go to the next slide, Brad. So I did talk a little bit yesterday about benefits counseling or work incentives counseling, and I'm just going to mention that again today in case there are people on the call that weren't here to hear yesterday. And again, this is not the only service that's available, but it is one of the services that can be available through an employment network that we feel is really key to helping individuals make informed choices about work. So just as a kind of a review, benefits counseling or work incentives counseling services are individualized to the person and address the effects that work and other life situations will have on disability benefit programs, whether they be federal programs like SSDI, SSI, state programs like Medicaid, SNAP, energy assistance, any of those kinds of things, or even those local benefit assistance programs, such as general assistance, like if you're in Douglas County or some of those kinds of things. But they really help address all of the important factors, I think, that go into a person's financial situation and things that they need to think about. And then because we are talking about self-employment, and some of the other speakers had mentioned, some differences versus self-employment versus wage employment, it is important to know that Social Security does look at those things a little bit differently. And self-employed could be something like an independent contractor. We've had several cases come up recently where they might be looking at doing something like DoorDash, Uber, Lyft. Some of those kinds of things are occupations that have fairly recently kind of become a viable thing, it seems like, for a lot of individuals. And when you're not getting taxes taken out of your wages, that is considered self-employment. So even if you're not necessarily starting your own business, in the sense that you typically think about starting your own business, it is important to be able to identify, what's self-employment versus wage employment and understand the implications of those net earnings from self-employment on the benefits and services that you receive. Okay, go to the next slide, Brad. I've talked about a little bit about this already and just the importance of those benefits counseling services. So just really quickly, it's really intended to help people make informed choices about work and avoid negative implications like overpayments, underpayments, incorrect eligibility determinations, and things like that. And then to make sure that we have time for what is actually a recording, not necessarily a great video like the one from Independence Rising, I'll go ahead and go to the next slide and just sort of reiterate the services that are available through Nebraska VR. When somebody does choose to work with Nebraska VR or the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired as their sort of employment network, it is possible to work with one of those agencies in sort of a quote short-term capacity, even though short-term may be kind of a long time, and then long-term reassign your ticket or have continued participation in the Ticket to Work program with a different employment network after you've successfully closed your case with VR. So I just wanted to remind everybody that even while you choose to work with Nebraska VR or the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired, but specifically Nebraska VR, there are providers that can provide those work incentives counseling services to individuals as they are sort of making those decisions in their employment planning process with VR. And that's where you get into the language of benefits assessment, benefits planning, and benefits management. So just wanted to remind everybody of that and let everybody know that that is something that is ongoing and available as well for people who choose to work with Nebraska VR as their employment network. And then lastly, I did include a slide that includes my contact name and information in case you do have any additional questions. And then a resource slide that has the Ticket to Work website and a couple of Social Security websites on it in case you would like to get more information. But hopefully you'll find the slides and the documents in the Dropbox helpful. And I think we'll go ahead and queue up and again, I'm throwing out the disclaimer that we don't have a professional looking video like the one from Independence Rising, which was fabulous. This is more of just a recording of Rebecca Cruz, who is a former Ticket to Work participant, and I having a conversation, hopefully with her doing most of the talking and sharing. She was not able to be here today to share her story in person like Sierra was. Unfortunately, she was not here, but actually it's kind of fortunate because the reason she couldn't be here is because she just started a brand new full-time job, which at this point is her ideal job. She's had quite the journey over several years. And again, from the stories in the video, you know, the point is, you know, everybody's journey is different. Some are longer than others. So I think with that, Brad, if you want to go ahead and queue up the video, that'd be great. With Easter Seals, Nebraska, and I have Rebecca Cruz with me, and she is a former Ticket to Work participant, and we're gonna talk with her today and ask her some questions and let her share some information about herself and her participation in the Ticket to Work program and what she thought was beneficial about that participation. So to start with, I'm gonna let her share a little bit about herself and her history to get us started.
I am Rebecca Cruz. I am a nurse. I have a history of brain cancer. With all of my treatments that I had to undergo throughout my journey, I was left with some residual effects, and that left me with balance problems and just lower extremity weakness. And so ultimately, after a long road and lots of surgeries, I ended up using a mobility scooter for most of the time. I think that's probably good from a history standpoint.
Okay. So what were some of the challenges when you were thinking about either re-entering the workforce and things like that? What were some of the, even maybe before you had realized about the Ticket to Work program and things like that, you had gotten on Social Security benefits as a result of your injuries and the challenges that you were experiencing. And so I guess I'm just wondering if there were any particular concerns or challenges that you were facing at the time you were first thinking about re-entering the workforce.
Yeah, so I was working and then I actually had to cut back hours because it became too difficult for me to independently transport my scooter. And so I would kind of have to work when I had someone who could help me get to and from work because I could not get the scooter in and out of my vehicle on my own. And so that was a big barrier for me, is just not having the independence to get in and out of a job. And then obviously moving around inside of the job was fine with the scooter, but just the biggest barrier for me was the transportation piece.
Okay. And then you have actually participated in the Ticket to Work program a couple of different times. You've participated and actually completed the program 2 different times. So were there particular setbacks or challenges that you like kind of throughout your long journey that you want to share, as far as besides the medical issues and things that you were experiencing? What were some other challenges that you had? Was it related to the employment situation, finding jobs? Was it related to benefits? Kind of what was the most significant things for you?
I think the biggest thing for me was just being able to be independent, and it wasn't necessarily finding a job. It was more so the transportation piece. And then also just for me, with the Social Security, with the disability, all that, it's such a messy system. And so I think just having the support to kind of help navigate all of that was one of the biggest helps for me.
Okay. And so if you remember about when you were first like looking at participating in the Ticket to Work program and things like that, do you remember how you chose an employment network, or and how you decided who you were going to work with?
I don't remember how I found you guys, but I remember after I met with you, I was pretty sure I wanted to work with you guys as far as just the services that would be available and kind of the ease of access and all of that. Just, it was a good fit for me.
Okay. And so what do you think were what was maybe the one thing or a couple of things that you felt were most helpful about having somebody to work with as far as an employment network or participation in the program?
I think just having someone kind of walk me through everything step by step, that was probably the biggest help, because I was just kind of lost in all of it. And so just having that kind of hand-holding guidance and reminders, and that was really the only way I would have been able to get through it.
Okay. And since you mentioned that transportation was probably one of your biggest considerations or your biggest barriers, at least at that time, and you were having somebody actually travel from somewhere else in the state to help you transport when you did have to go to work. So can you tell us just a little bit about utilizing the Plan to Achieve Self-Support and how that helped you in purchasing the vehicle that you could have modified for your own transportation?
Yeah, so the past plan was just really helpful in, I'm not a super disciplined person by nature, so it was really helpful to kind of have the past plan set up that it was very like a set amount that I would put away every month, and that could only go towards the transportation. And so in finding a vehicle, I just had to find something that was big enough. And that meant it needed to have a third row that could be put down. And so those vehicles are pretty expensive. And it just allowed me to put away enough money every month to really be able to afford a decent sized payment and also get it paid off quickly. Quick.
I'm sorry. I want to pause it there so we've got about 5 more minutes until 2:30, just so we can be, we said we were going to end at 2:30. Are there any questions? If you want to watch the rest of the video, I mean, I'm sure we can figure out a way to keep on if you want to watch it, but I just want to make sure that there's enough time kind of left for anybody who has any questions before they have to bust out at 2:30.
Yeah, I think that's good. This is Shauna. I just want to follow up really quick. Rebecca's story is sort of a long journey over from like 2008 to now. So we're talking about 12 years. So as before, don't be discouraged. There's been times where she had to stop working and change up the hours that she was working and change jobs. So just be encouraged to follow your own journey, I guess, is what I would say as a follow-up to that.
The question that was in the chat box was, how do you get involved with Ticket to Work? And I put in the nebraskatickettowork.org link and informed that there's no actual physical ticket involved. So they don't have to worry about they lose the ticket. It's an idea
right.
Deeper.
Social Security at one point was actually sending out like a paper certificate. They called a ticket, and they have sort of randomly done that throughout the years. But you don't actually have to have a physical ticket, like you said, Mary, to participate in the program. Essentially, if you're between the ages of 18 and 64, you're eligible for Social Security disability and or SSI benefits, and you've been approved as an adult. So if you're under the age of 18, you have to be approved as an adult at 18, and you're eligible for the ticket program. You don't have to have that paper ticket. You can go to the nebraskatickettowork.org website that Mary put in there, or you can go to that Choose Work site through Social Security's website and look at all of the different employment networks and things that are an option for you. Nebraska VR or the state VR agencies being one of those. And so that's really all that's required to be able to participate. Now, I will say the beneficiary choice is also the employment network's choice. So there are employment networks out there who might say they only work with individuals who receive SSDI benefits. If you receive only SSI, they may not work with you. And so, you just have to, again, like interview each employment network to make sure it's the employment network that fits for you. But just because one employment network says that they would not work with you doesn't mean another one won't. So just keep exploring your options.
Thank you very much. Melanie wants to remind us as we wrap up, we hope that you've enjoyed today's presentations. Please join us tomorrow for more awesome information. Be ready for discussion of the film Hearts of Glass, which you can find at the link that she provided in the chat box. That will be a wonderful discussion tomorrow.
Okay. And just real quick, I see a question from Mindy asking if you have to go through VR in order to work with an employment network. And the answer is no. VR is just one option as an employment network, but you don't have to choose them as an option. You could choose to work with any employment network that you'd like.
Great. Well, thank you, Shauna. That was very informative. Kathy, do you have any last words in terms of wrapping up this event today?
No, I